She is a native Philadelphian who has made a genuine contribution to the life and development of Tanganyika. She has been made available to us through the courtesy of Mrs. Elizabeth Heffelfinger. I'm not going to take time really to introduce Mrs. Heffelfinger because it would take some time to run over her activities and accomplishments. Let me say merely that she is very highly respected for her work and achievements in this community and throughout the nation. She is presently a member of the Governor's Human Rights Commission, of the President's Advisory Commission on Human Rights, and the director of the International Center for Student and Visitors in this area. She has been, as I think some of you know, very active in UNESCO affairs, and I'll stop there without telling you all the things that could be said about her, and ask Mrs. Heffelfinger then if she will introduce our speaker to us. Mrs. Heffelfinger.
Thank you, Dean Quanbeck. We are delighted to be here as your visitors in this very beautiful hall. You're to be congratulated. This morning, it's a great privilege for me to introduce to you our guest speaker. Lady Chesham and her husband, Lord Chesham, left England and moved to southern Tanganyika before World War II. When war broke out, she returned to England, where she was very active in the Red Cross, the ATS, and work among volunteer women for the war effort. After the war, in 1947, they moved back to Tanganyika, and in 1954, when her husband died, she sold her home and went into cash crop farming in coffee for the first time in order to support her family of 4 children. In 1955, she ran for the legislature, which is now the parliament, and was backed by the TANU party, the Tanganyika African Nationalist Union. In 1960, she ran again without any opposition and was elected by an all-African constituency. I think that personally I'm very proud to introduce this woman because she is an American, born and raised in Philadelphia. And it gives me a great thrill to see an American woman with the understanding and the service to mankind as she has. Her entire life is given to the things she believes in a strong, independent Africa, in an Africa who can eke out their own economic development, their own process of free government. She believes in those people, she loves them, and she is devoting her life to Africa and the free government of Africa and the people of Tanganyika. With great pleasure, I present to you Lady Marion Chesham of Tanganyika, Member of Parliament.
Thank you all very, very much. I like looking at all these young faces. It reminds me of our parliament in Tanganyika. We're a young country. We have a young government. I want to thank you very much for having me here today, and all of you for coming to listen to me. I wanted to tell people here in the country where I came from and that I love very much about the second country that I love very much and its people. Because you see, we haven't hit the headlines very often. We've quietly got on with our job. We've attained our independence without violence, without riots. I wanted to tell you why and how we have done that. Because I think it's important for you to know that it can be done. Tanganyika is the only country in Africa that is independent, that I can become a citizen of, with full citizenship rights. And I am a citizen of Tanganyika. There isn't any other African country that offers that. to people of other races. And that came about through the Africans of Tanganyika themselves. The idea and the plan that gave us that came from them. It didn't come from us. And that isn't a thing that happened overnight. That feeling of friendliness and friendship that we have in Tanganyika between all our people didn't suddenly happen when somebody waved a stick and said, we'll do it this way. That was a thing that was slowly built up and built on a strong foundation. Up until 1920, the history of Tanganyika was a very sad history. It was a history of wars. But even those wars contributed to the present Tanganyika because they gave to Tanganyika unity amongst the African people that you don't find in many other countries. And that unity came about because the big fighting tribes joined together to throw out what they considered an invader. They fought the Germans for 6 years, were only beaten because of modern fighting methods, modern for those days, that the Germans knew. And then the end of the 1418 war, Tanganyika became a mandate of the League of Nations. And she was lucky enough to be put under British administration. Now that may sound very odd coming from me, who am a strong supporter of the Tanganyika African National Union and am supported by them. But it's true that Tanganyika is lucky to have been under British administration and to have had the governor that she had in the beginning, Cameron, who believed in teaching the people how to govern themselves. And it was laid down in the League of Nations that that was the job of the administering power to do, to bring the people along to the place where they could govern themselves. And again, after the Second World War, we were a trustee country, a UN country, still administered by the British. And in that trustee agreement, it was put even stronger. The African in Tanganyika was being taught to govern himself. Now, the only fight we had with the British in Tanganyika was how soon were we going to be independent? How soon could we have it? And when Julius Nyerere went out first to talk to his people, to organize them into a political party, he never attacked the European. He never made a racial attack, but he attacked the colonial government. He said, we don't want them anymore. We want to rule ourselves, and we want to govern ourselves. And we are, a great many of us feel that we have reached the point where we want a date of when we can do this. And in 1956, he went to UN for the first time. And it was hoped then that Tanganyika would have her independence in 25 years. She got it in 7. And she got it because every Tanganyikan worked together. The first elections were in 1958. They were on a parity basis. That was laid down that there must be, it was laid down by the colonial government, that there must be 10 Europeans, 10 Africans, and 10 Asians in that legislative council, but that they could be freely elected by all the people of Tanganyika. They were not elected on a communal basis. You had to be elected by African, Asian, and European, but there had to be 10, 10, 10. Tanganyika African National Union didn't like that very much. It said that perpetuates racialism. That accents racialism. 10, 10, 10. In a country where there are 9.5 million Africans, 24,000 Europeans, and 90,000 Asians. But they fought that election, and they won it. And the day the 10-10-10 took their seats for the first time in Legislative Council, Julius Nyerere made a speech which I will never forget. He said, "Here we are. We don't like parity. We don't believe in perpetuation of racial barriers. But we fought this election, and here we sit. Not 10 Africans, 10 Asians, and 10 Europeans, but 30 Tanganyikans." And that was true. We were 30 Tanganyikans in opposition to the colonial government. At that time, they had a perpetual majority of 5 over us. But we were free to say whatever we felt like. We could attack that government in the rudest parliamentary language that we could find, and we did it. And nobody put us in jail, and nobody arrested us. We were free to do it. And we did it. We wanted to get rid of them. We wanted to sit on that front bench and have our people on it, running our country, because we all felt we were Tanganyikans. And we felt, I give a woman's simile, felt like any woman would feel if somebody said, "Well, you don't know enough yet to cook dinner. You can only cook a very simple one. We'll bring in a good French chef for you. Do everything in your house for you and feed your husband, feed your children." I don't think any woman would like it an awful lot. I think every woman wants to burn her own cakes. And that's what we wanted to do. So then there were constitutional commissions and meetings and discussions with our governor and with the colonial office. And in 1960, we had the elections that gave us a majority. And that was worked out by a committee called the Ramage Committee. Sir Richard Ramage came out from England to be chairman of it. And on that committee were Africans, Asians, Europeans, and representatives of the colonial government. And we traveled around the whole country, and we took the opinions of people in every town, and indeed in many small villages, and we discussed things. And it was then that at the TANU political party meeting, what are we going to put up as what we, the strong political party, want? It was at that meeting that the present Prime Minister of Tanganyika, Rashidi Kawawa, made the speech that I wish could be published every place. He said, "It is not the responsibility of the Asian or the European to say if he will be represented or how he will be. It is an African responsibility. It is our duty to work out some plan by which they will know that they are safe in this country, that they are happy in this country, and that they can be represented in the government of this country. We must see to it that the minority communities are represented." And he was followed by one African after another, backing him up on what he said. And sitting beside me was an Asian who was half Arab. And the Arabs brought great tragedy to Tanganyika in the slave raiding days. And he sat there and he was crying and he said, "My God, we don't deserve it." And that was the African attitude. And it's from that that grew our present government, our present representation. And when we had these elections in 1960, we returned 50 African members, elected by all communities, 10 European members, elected by all communities, and 11 Asians, because there are more Asians there than there are Europeans. And from that elected legislature was chosen the cabinet. And in that cabinet at that time were 2 Europeans, 1 Asian, and 10 Africans. We've lost one of our European ministers lately, Sir Ernest Vesey, who was Minister of Finance. He was not fired from his job or sacked or turned out, as you may have heard or read in some reports. He couldn't be a cabinet minister because in independent Tanganyika, he is not yet eligible for citizenship. You can't be a cabinet minister if you're not a citizen of the country. He's only been in Tanganyika 2 years. He must be there longer. But they didn't want to lose him. They realized his value and how he had helped us. So he is staying in Tanganyika as financial advisor to the Tanganyika government. And that's the feeling. It works. Non-racialism, we call it. We don't like the word multiracialism. We think multiracialism perpetuates, again, many races. Non-racialism is what's he worth for himself. His race shouldn't come into it in judging him. What is he worth in himself? And we're making it work in Tanganyika. And we want the understanding and the moral support of all the peoples we can to realize what we're trying to do, to strengthen us. Because in many countries in Africa, I don't have to tell you, it doesn't work. It's the foundation again. It didn't come overnight. We've never had a color bar in Tanganyika. We've never had any trouble. We've never had a land problem in Tanganyika. Under this administration, if I wanted a piece of land in Tanganyika, I couldn't just go and get it and have it given to me. The district commissioner had to consult with the local government of that area, get their agreement to my having that land. And if the Africans living on that land didn't want to move, they had to be compensated if they did. I couldn't have that land. I had it by agreement, and so no grievance was built up about land. And now we've come to independence, December 9th, 1961. We have a great many wonderful leading Africans. We haven't got enough yet. And that's where you're helping us. By taking our students from Tanganyika and helping us to hurry up their education so that they can go back to their own country and teach and take their place in government. And until they can take their place in government, a great many British civil servants have agreed to stay on. Some of them have signed on for 5 more years. Because if they didn't, we'd have a gap. And we couldn't have paid those British civil servants ourselves. Our local rate of payment is very low indeed. So the British government in the United Kingdom is paying the difference to them. We still fight with them occasionally. We still think they haven't made the complete mental changeover. But we're glad they're with us until our own people are ready to take their places. And we've got them there. We went back to London last summer. We had quite a thing putting up the argument to the British government. But they supported us. And that emphasizes again what I'm trying to tell you. The fight for independence in Tanganyika was never on a racial basis. It was to get the British colonial civil service, the British colonial government out of Tanganyika and govern ourselves. These British colonial civil servants who belong to us now belong to a Tanganyika civil service. They're not under the colonial office in London any longer. They're under the Tanganyika government with its African majority. And that's a very different way to have them. And we very much appreciate their staying on those conditions. And that is the only conditions on which we want them. Sometimes here, criticism, and I'm asked questions. People say, but you have a one-party government. That's not democracy. That's a dictatorship. It is democracy. The African that I know, from the time he's a child, has known what democracy means. In a village, if a problem comes up, the river's changed its course, the rains have been short, and it has to be discussed. It's discussed by the whole village under the tree, the biggest tree. And it's discussed for days sometimes until agreement is reached. And that's the form our one-party government takes. If you sat in the gallery of what is now our parliament, because we're independent, you'd think there were about 8 opposition parties in that house. Everybody's saying what they feel, apparently attacking their own government. There's no dictatorship about it. It's government by discussion. We have another political party in Tanganyika. It's called the Congress Party. It put up 9 candidates in the last election. They all lost their deposits. Their chairman got 167 votes. Is that our fault? The people wanted us instead of this Congress Party. Wouldn't the Republicans love it if they thought they could win every seat in Congress? And would any criticism from the world outside make them create an artificial opposition party in order to be what some people thought must be democracy? As long as the fundamental principles of democracy are held on to firmly, it must be adapted to fit the country that it's exported to. We've taken, not just since 1776 to develop our democracy in America, remember. There was a lot, hundreds of years of experience behind that we learned from. Things that England had learned and France had learned, and we learned from them and built it. But would you call our government exactly like the British government? And they're a democracy. Or exactly like the French government? They call themselves a democracy. We're doing the same thing in Tanganyika. We're taking the best from you and building on it our democracy in Tanganyika. And it's what we believe in. It is the basis of everything we believe in. Democracy for all the people, irrespective of their race or their creed or their religion. I think I'd like to tell you 1 or 2 things that might interest you particularly. Our new Minister of Education in Tanganyika is the son of the first Lutheran Padre of Tanganyika. He's a great leader. He's president of the Wachaga tribe. He was educated in America. He's a very wonderful young man. I know him quite well. I've known most of them since they were knee-high to grasshopper. I've been out there so long, and they're such a young government. And the main thing in our 3-year development plan, the top priority, is education. We have a crash program, and we have a program that will enable every child in Tanganyika to be educated. And you people here are helping us tremendously. Not just getting our students over here to learn what's in books and to go back with degrees, but to learn the things you can only learn by meeting other people and exchanging ideas with them and learning that your own narrow viewpoint is not always the right one, but you can adapt it and you can change it. And that's what they learn when they come here. They touch another world. They don't always perhaps agree with you, but the very fact that they don't makes a spark that brings life. And they come back to us, and they come back with new ideas, and they come back in a terrible hurry. They want everything the day after tomorrow, after they see what happens here. And we have to slow them down a little bit and take it a step at a time. Our Minister for Commerce and Industry, Silo Swire, was educated in America. He came down and said goodbye to me at the airport when I started off to come here. And he said, now, don't forget, the first thing when you get there, just say hi for me, because I love that country. And quite by accident the other day, there was a photograph with me saying hi, so I've cut it out and sent it back to him. So he knows I've kept my word to him. Now, I'm sure a lot of people don't understand the recent resignation of Mr. Nyerere. It hasn't had the best publicity. And I'm afraid I can't blame anybody but ourselves for that, Tanganyika. We're young in advertising ourselves. We're young in how to handle public relations. And so the bare fact was announced, and it led to interpretations you can't blame people for making when they don't know the background of Tanganyika. But let me assure you, there has been no split in Tanu. That resignation was a thing that Mr. Nyerere could only do from strength. And Rashidi Kawawa, who's now Prime Minister, is one of his oldest friends, one of the earliest people to fight beside him. His echo in everything he believes. His resignation, it's a formal word that has to be used. What he's really done is hand over administrative work so that he can stay closer to his people and keep them steady and keep them on the path that they're on now and guard them against outside agitation and being taught wrong ideas. And he can't do that if he's a prime minister surrounded with protocol and red carpets and plainclothes policemen. And he knows it. And he's a very humble man. He has no personal ambition. He doesn't care if he's called prime minister or what. He's kept his presidency and leadership of the political party. He still has his seat in parliament. And he can attack the government now if he wants to. If he thinks they're not going fast enough or they're going too fast. And before he couldn't. The other day I saw in a newspaper in Philadelphia, in the Evening Bulletin, a quotation from the first speech that Rashidi Kawawa made after he became Prime Minister. And I think it answers the rumors that Rashidi Kawawa is an extremist and a leftist and had a disagreement with his leader Nyerere. Because in it, Kawawa said, anyone stirring up racial feeling will be expelled from Tanganyika. 3 Africans and 5 Europeans have been expelled from Tanganyika recently for racialism or incitement to racialism. And I want to say that anyone, African, Asian, or European, who does the same will get the same treatment. Doesn't sound like a racial extremist. Doesn't sound like a man following his leader on non-racialism has come to disagreement with him. You see, we won't have it in Tanganyika. It's the only way in which our stability, our political stability, can be attacked, is to brew up racialism And we've seen around us the horrible examples of what happens as a result. And believe me, the African is no fool. He can see. And he can see that it does nothing, brings nothing but horror to a country. And he doesn't want it. Now, there's so much I can tell you about Tanganyika. I don't know if I've given you a basic idea of what we've built on and of what we're trying to do. And I emphasize, we in Tanganyika are doing it. And if we can do it, other people can do it too. And we want your support. We want your practical support, very, very much indeed. But we also want to feel that you understand us and that you sympathize with us and that we have your moral support in this thing that we are trying to do in Africa. Because it can spread beyond Africa. I'm told sometimes that I'm a visionary idealist. I'm not a bit practical. But it's awfully practical not to have racial disagreements, not to have wars. We then can get on with the job of making a better world for our children. I think that's practical. I think it's worth trying, and we've all got it in us to be able to do it. I think I'd like now to give you a chance to ask me anything you want to, because then I'll know what your particular interest is. Would you like to ask me any questions?